She placed the veil on the altar herself. No tears. No trembling hands. No desperate plea for him to change his mind. Mira folded the white silk with the same quiet care she had used to fold her mother's letters, set it down like a final answer, and walked out of the great hall of Castle Thormere while 500 people watched in absolute silence. Nobody stopped her. That was the part that would stay with her longest, not the betrayal itself, but the silence of 500 people who had eaten at her family's table, danced at her mother's festivals, bowed their heads when her name was called at court. 500 people, and not one voice. It had started so differently just an hour before. "You look like a queen already," her handmaid Bess had whispered, fastening the last button at Mira's back. "Before you even reach the altar." "I am not trying to look like a queen," Mira had said softly, studying her reflection. "I am trying to look like someone worth choosing." Bess had gone quiet then, in that particular way she had when she knew something Mira did not. Her hands had stilled. Her eyes had dropped. "Mira, do not," Mira had said gently. "Not today. Let me have today." And Bess, who loved her, had let her have it. The walk down the aisle had felt like a dream. Candlelight. Silk banners in gold and crimson. Prince Caden standing at the altar in his formal coat, dark-haired and handsome in the way that paintings are handsome, admirable from a distance, cold up close. Mira had smiled at him. He had not smiled back. She had thought it was nerves. Then Lady Voss had stepped out from the left side of the altar, sleek, deliberate, wearing a smile like a drawn blade, and Mira had understood, one terrible second before it happened, exactly what was about to occur. Caden's voice had been practiced. Calm. Almost kind, which was somehow the worst version of it. "The crown has determined that a stronger alliance is needed for the stability of Thormere. Lady Seraphine of the Northern Houses has been selected as my intended. This decision is final and has the blessing of the king." The room had not gasped. It had exhaled, a collective, carefully neutral breath, the sound of 500 people choosing not to have an opinion. Mira had stood at the altar alone. She had looked at Caden and waited for him to meet her eyes. He looked slightly to the left of her face, not at her, not away, just past her, as though she had already become scenery. That was when she reached up and removed the veil. Lady Voss had spoken then, her voice wrapped in false warmth, like poison in honey. "Arrangements have been made for Mira's resettlement in the borderlands. The region of Ashenveil has been prepared for her comfort and privacy." There was no region prepared. There was no comfort. There was a crumbling ruin at the edge of the known world that the court called cursed and children were warned away from in stories. They all knew this. Every single person in that hall knew it. And every single person said nothing. Mira walked out. The road to Ashenveil took 3 days. She was given a horse that was too old, a satchel that was too thin, and an escort of 2 guards who did not speak to her and peeled away at the borderland boundary without a word, as though proximity to her exile might contaminate them. She arrived at the ruins just before dark on the 3rd day. Ashenveil was not what she expected. She had imagined rubble, emptiness, the hollow silence of a place long dead. But standing at the threshold, the air felt different, not cold, not hostile, but aware. Like a room where someone had just been standing. The stones were old. Ancient carvings ran along every surface, worn smooth by centuries of wind, still faintly visible. Arches that should have collapsed stood intact. A well sat at the center of the ruins, perfectly preserved, as though the decay had refused to touch it. Mira did not explore that first night. She sat with her back against the most solid wall she could find, pulled her cloak tight, and allowed herself, at last, to feel it. Not the humiliation. Not the rage. The grief. Because she had believed in Thormere. She had believed in the idea that goodness was recognized, that loyalty was rewarded, that if you showed up with an open heart, the world would treat it with care. She wept quietly, alone, with no audience to perform for and no dignity left to protect. And something in the ruins wept with her, or perhaps answered her. A low, resonant hum moved through the stone beneath her palms. A dead vine on the wall beside her pushed out a single green shoot. Mira pulled her hand back. She looked at the vine. She pressed her palm to the stone again, slowly. The hum returned. She did not sleep that night. In the days that followed, the land continued to respond. A cracked foundation sealed where she walked across it. Water rose in a dry stone basin when she knelt beside it. She began to understand that the responses were not random, they were relational. The land was not just reacting to her presence. It was recognizing her. She found the well on the 5th day. The inscription was carved in a language that should have been foreign to her but read in her mind as clearly as her own name. Only the one who is offered and refused shall draw from this well. She stood there for a long time. Offered as a bride, as a symbol, as a political offering placed on an altar for a kingdom's convenience. Refused. Her hands were not shaking when she lowered the ancient bucket. Her breathing was steady. She drew the water up and she drank, and the world went white and bright and wide, and somewhere deep in her chest, something that had been locked for 23 years finally, completely opened. The magic of Ashenveil did not feel like power. It felt like remembering. She did not know how many days passed after the awakening. Time in Ashenveil moved differently now, not slower, but deeper. She learned the land the way you learn a language, by living inside it. Root and frost, stone and wind. The ruins rebuilt themselves around her slowly, almost shyly, as though they had been waiting for permission. She was not building an army. She was building certainty. There is a difference, and it matters enormously. An army is assembled from anger. Certainty grows from something far more dangerous, the knowledge of exactly who you are and what you carry. The messenger arrived on what she believed was the 14th morning. He came on foot, his horse long since dead from the dusk rot, his face gray and cracked with exhaustion. He collapsed at the edge of Ashenveil, and she was already there, already kneeling beside him before he could call out. "Lady Mira," he rasped. "Just Mira," she said. "Drink this." She pressed water to his lips. He drank. "The kingdom is dying," he said. "The dusk rot came 3 weeks ago. Started in the eastern fields, spread to the granaries. Now it's in the city. People are," he stopped. "Swallowed. The king is in his bed. His healers are useless. The sorcerers tried everything. Nothing touches it." Mira was quiet. "Lady Voss is saying it's a curse," the messenger continued, watching her carefully. "There are people who are saying, not loudly, but saying that it started when you were exiled. That the land rejected what was done to you." "The land did not curse Thornmere," Mira said evenly. "The land simply stopped protecting it." The messenger stared at her for a long moment. "Can you stop it?" She looked out across the rebuilt ruins of Ashenveil, green and gold now, alive and breathing, ancient banners moving in a wind that smelled like cedar and rain. "Yes," she said. "Will you?" The silence stretched long enough that the messenger's face began to tighten with dread. "Yes," she said again. "But not for the crown. And not for Caden. I will go because there are people in that city who are hungry and frightened and do not deserve to pay for what their prince did." She rode for Thornmere the next morning. The road itself seemed to understand what was happening. The dusk wrought black and creeping, rotting the bark from the trees and the color from the grass, retreated from her path as she rode. People working the ruined outer fields stopped and watched. A child pointed. Her mother pulled her close, then slowly let her go to keep watching. By the time Mira reached the city gates, there were people lining the road in silence, the way you stand when you are witnessing something that hasn't been named yet. The gates were iron and oak, reinforced. They had been locked against her once. They opened before she reached them. Not by order. Not by any guard's hand. The ancient iron simply moved, responding to the same pulse that had been answering her for weeks. The guards on either side stepped back, not in fear and instinct. Something older than their training told them to stand aside. She rode through without stopping. The throne room was exactly as she remembered it. High ceilings, cold stone, gold that was more about intimidation than beauty. The court parted as she walked in, not gracefully, not with choreographed drama. They stumbled back, uncertain, reading something in her that their language did not quite have words for. Lady Voss found her words first. She always did. This is highly irregular. You have no standing in this court, no title, no. Mira walked past her. Not around her. Past her. As though she had become furniture. As though the air Voss occupied was simply air. Voss stopped speaking. Caden stood at the far end of the room. He looked older than 14 days should have made him. There were shadows beneath his eyes and something brittle in his posture, the look of a man who has been performing confidence so long the performance is fracturing. Mira. Her name in his mouth sounded like an apology and an accusation at once. Prince Caden. We didn't know that the Duskrot would. No, she agreed. You didn't know about the Duskrot. You knew about me, though. You knew exactly what you were doing when you stood at that altar. The room was so silent she could hear the candles. I made a political decision, he said, and she could hear him reaching for justification the way a drowning man reaches for anything floating. The kingdom required honesty, Mira said. You could have come to me privately. You could have told me the truth before I stood in front of 500 people in a wedding gown. You chose not to because it was easier to sacrifice my dignity than to spend your own. His jaw tightened. His eyes dropped. She did not wait for an answer. She walked to the chamber where King Aldrich lay, gray-faced, barely breathing, the Duskrot visible in the black veins crawling up his neck. His attendants pressed themselves against the walls as she entered. She sat beside him. She placed both palms on his chest. The magic moved through her like a river finding its course, purposeful, unhurried, absolute. The black veins retreated slowly, then faster, then all at once. Aldrich's color returned. His breathing deepened. Outside, through the high windows, she could hear the court watching in silence, and beyond them, through the city, the sound of people crying out not in pain, in relief. The blight was lifting across Thormere in waves, retreating from the city to the fields to the trees, dissolving at the boundary like smoke at a window. King Aldrich opened his eyes. He looked at her for a long time. Who are you? He asked finally. I am the one your son threw away, she said quietly. And the one your kingdom needed. He closed his eyes again. Not in weakness, in something that looked, if you watched carefully, like shame. When she returned to the throne room, Caden was waiting. Something in him had shifted, the brittle performance was gone. What was left underneath was younger, rawer, genuinely sorry in the way people are when it is too late to be useful. Stay, he said. Please. I will give you any title you want. Any position. I will make it right, Mira, I swear to you. You cannot make it right, she said. Not cruelly. Factually. Right would have been the truth at the altar. Right would have been one voice in that hall. Right is not a title handed to me after I have proven I do not need one. He had no answer. She walked to the door. The borderlands are mine, she said, without turning back. Ashenveil rises again under my hand. It will be a place of healing for anyone the kingdom discards, and there will always be more of them than you expect. And the crown? Caden asked quietly. You want nothing from us? She stopped. She considered the question with genuine seriousness, because she was the kind of person who answered questions honestly even when she had already won. I want you to remember, she said, that you had something rare and you chose convenience instead. Remember it every time this kingdom needs saving and has to come looking toward the borderlands. She walked out. The same doors. The same threshold. But nothing else was the same, not the air, not her stride, not the way the court watched her go. At the window above the courtyard, old Bess stood with her hands pressed to the glass and tears running down her face, and she was the only person in the entire castle who was smiling. Mira rode back to Ashenveil as the sun broke through the clouds over Thormere for the first time in weeks. The land around her was green and breathing and alive. Behind her, a kingdom stood in silence, not the silence of indifference that had filled that hall on her wedding day. The silence of awe. They called her the forgotten bride for a season until that name no longer fit. History would find better ones. The people of Ashenveil, and there were people, in time, many of them called her simply home. Asterisk if this story moved you. You already know what to do. Like this video, drop a comment telling us which moment hit hardest, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. The next tale is already waiting for you.